طيب إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. After praising Allah Azza wa Jalla, sending praise upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his household, his companions, we continue in our study of Fiqh Seerah. Inshallah, today we're going to talk about the building of the Kaaba, and that which is connected to such. Inshallah, we can take some benefits from this event. Now, as you all know, the Kaaba was the first house. They call it the first house, placed for the people. Is everyone with me? The first house placed for the people. Allah tells us this in the Quran. إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ. That the first house that was placed for the people was the one that was, in the Quran it says Bibekka, and as we all know, one of the names of Mecca is Bekka. Fine. And so Allah is talking about the Kaaba here. So it's the first house that was placed for the people. And likewise, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, by one of the companions, what was the first masjid placed for the people, or placed on the earth? And he said, Al-Masjid Al-Haram. And the companion then asked, and then after that, and he replied, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Alam Aid al-Mujahideen. When we say the first house placed for the people, the hadith that I just mentioned explains the meaning of the first house, because Allah tells us in the Quran that the Kaaba, that was the first house placed for the people. The meaning of house here is a house of ibadah, a house of worship. And that's why when the Prophet was asked, he was asked what was the first masjid placed on earth. So this explains to us the meaning of the word house in the verse. The first one, as we all know, to build the Kaaba was Ibrahim alayhi salam. With the help of Ismail alayhi salam, his son. And again, Allah tells us this information in the Quran. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا, to the end of the verse. Allah tells us in the Quran that about when Ibrahim raised the foundations of the house, and Ismail along with him. Likewise, Allah Azza wa Jal informed Ibrahim, revealed to Ibrahim alayhi salam, the place that the house should be built. Is everyone with me? And again, this is in the Quran as well. Allah tells us, وَإِذْ بَوَّأْنَا لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ مَكَانَ الْبَيْتِ. So Allah tells us this. It's said that the Kaaba, when it was first built, was built from just stones, from just rocks placed upon each other, and there was no substance or cement or the like, which actually latched and stuck the stones together and kept the stones together. It was just stones placed upon each other. And rather, there's a hadith mentioned that tell us that at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was no wall around the Kaaba either. So if we know this, that there was no house, why is this important? Because during history, things affected the Kaaba. Whether it be floods, some people say fires and stuff like this. Affected the Kaaba, affected the structure of the Kaaba, the walls of the Kaaba. It's narrated that, for example, a flood afflicted and damaged some of the walls, and weakened the foundation of the Kaaba. And some people say, as I said, it was a fire. So when this happened, so previously things like this have happened, and likewise at the time of the Quraysh, just before the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something like this had taken place. And so now the walls were weakened, and the foundation was affected. So the Quraysh, bear in mind this is before Islam. Very important that this is before Islam. The Quraysh now took it upon themselves to rebuild or rectify that damage which was caused. Is everyone with me? Fine. They wanted to rectify this damage that was caused. They were actually very hesitant as to how to go about this in the beginning. Why? Because as we know, it was something they would sanctify. It was something that they would glorify and exonerate. And in order to rectify it, they would have to take it down. They would have to take it down and start again. Fine, to rebuild from scratch. And so when this first happened, they were very anxious. And one of them actually said, "Oh Quraysh, are you gonna go now to the Kaaba when you take it down? Are you taking it down in order to rectify it, or are you taking it down as a means of in an evil manner?" Fine, with that as your intent to harm it and to tear it down. And so this man who said this, he went from the Quraysh, he went and he started to take it down, and the people would look onto him and say, if he lasts till the morning, if something doesn't befall this man that started taking apart parts of the Kaaba, then we'll join in and we'll help. Fine. However, if something does, then they know that they shouldn't start taking it down. So morning time come and the man was fine, and so all of the Quraysh got together and they started what? They started taking down the damaged walls of the Kaaba until they reached the foundation which Ibrahim alayhi salam had laid. Is everyone got to hear? Right? And so they started to build upon this. Very important, the Quraysh, when they're rectifying the structure of the Kaaba, they didn't allow any wealth, fine, which had come from illicit means. They didn't allow this type of wealth to be spent in the rectifying of the Kaaba. Fine, whether that money be from interest, or that money be from some form of oppression, or that etc. Fine, any money that had come from an impure source, they would not allow this to be spent on the Kaaba. Fine. In regards to the rectification of the Kaaba, the Prophet ﷺ himself actually partook in this with his uncle Abbas. Fine. They both helped in transferring the stones, fine, from one to another. And then comes the famous story of the differing that happened over the black stone. Now obviously every one of the tribes of Quraysh wants to honor, and we all know this story well that every one of the tribes wanted the honor of placing the black stone in its place. Fine, to the point that it almost reached war. Fine, the quarreling and bickering almost reached bloodshed. And so one of the heads of the Quraysh told them, or came up with a conclusion, and that was what? Whoever comes next into the Haram area, he will be the judge between us. How about that? And so they all agreed. And Allah willed that the Prophet ﷺ be the next one that come in. Is everyone with me? And so the Prophet ﷺ came in, and everyone was pleased. Rather, it was said, Ataakum al-Amin, Ataakum Muhammad, that the truthful one has come to you. Muhammad has come to you. And so they were all pleased. No one was displeased with the fact that Muhammad has come through. We're happy that he be the judge between us. And so the very famous story of the Prophet ﷺ, in his wisdom, he laid out a sheet, a garment, whatever you want to call it, and placed the stone on this, fine, and then got all the tribes to hold a side each, and then they all placed it towards its location, and then the Prophet ﷺ is the one that pushed it off onto its place. Fine, and so with this, a lot of bloodshed was avoided. Fine. Also important to note is that we mentioned that the Quraysh, they didn't want to spend impure wealth on the Kaaba. Fine. So what happened is they actually run out. They didn't have enough funds to complete this rectification or renovation of the Kaaba. Fine. So they actually left a part of it, and they say it's about 4 arm lengths. They actually left this. Fine. And instead they built like a wall around it. Fine. A small wall around it, just to notify anyone that is actually part of the Kaaba, even though there's no continuation of the building, that is actually still part of the Kaaba. Fine. And this is what's known today as what they call the Hujr, fine, or the Hamid, or the Hatim. Is everyone with me? Or the Hatim, meaning that part which was destroyed. Any questions up to here? They differ over the time that this good. They differ over the time that this renovation took place. That which is correct, or that which we see to be correct, is that it was very close to the prophethood of Muhammad. Fine, it was very close to his being dispatched as a prophet, and they say that it's about 5 years before that. Fine. And that which indicates to it being close to his prophethood sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that Aisha, his wife, actually asked him. She actually asked him, why don't you rebuild it upon the foundations of Ibrahim, how it was? Fine. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, لولا حدثان قومك بالكفر لفعلت. That if it wasn't for the fact that your people were new, as in they've only just left disbelief, they've only just left their old ways, they've only just left Jahiliyyah, then I would have done so. Fine. So the Prophet ﷺ in this aspect looked towards the overwhelming benefit, fine, and the condition of the people at the time, and said it's best not to. Fine. Moving on to the benefits that we can take from this event. The benefits that we can take from the renovation of the Kaaba and the events that took place with regard to such. First of all, a very important benefit here is that these Arabs, fine, which hadn't even found Islam yet, Islam hadn't even come to them yet, fine, they perceived the lowliness and the filthiness and the wretchedness of haram wealth, of wealth which has been attained in impure manners, in illicit manners. They understood and perceived the wretchedness of interest, of money that was gained from some form of oppression. Is everyone with me? They understood this, and what's strange is that this is before Islam, before Allah brought them the light of Islam, before He gave them guidance. Right? This is in what they call the time of Jahiliyyah, the time of ignorance. Right? Yet they took it upon themselves, fine, and were actually very strict and rigid in regard to this, that only that wealth which was pure, fine, would be used in regard to these affairs. Right? And the sad thing is that after Allah has given us Islam, after Allah has given us this light and guided us and given us this blessing, we see interest and haram both widespread. Fine. To the point that you'll see that many people don't even find it in themselves to make inkar of this, to even show their displeasure to this. Fine. Because it's so widespread. So the kuffar of Quraysh were cautious. They were cautious in regard to riba, fine, and that which is like it. They were cautious in regard to prohibited wealth, fine. Yet you find from the Muslims today, his food is haram, his drink is haram, his clothes are haram. Is everyone with me? So this is a huge benefit that we can take, fine. That a person has to now come, he has to stop and he has to ask himself as a Muslim, fine. He has to be truthful with himself, fine, not sugarcoat the matter, but we have to ask ourselves and say, if we don't cling to these type of guidances that Islam gave us, if we don't cling to these matters and these, what they call tawjihad, this guidance of Islam, then what has Islam benefited us in regards to? What benefit has Islam brought us? Because we're not, apparently haven't clung to Islam. Right? So we have to be honest with ourselves and ask that question. Fine? Is it merely the name of Islam that we're clinging to, or are we taking guidance and taking benefit from that which the principles of al-Islam? Fine? And it's a very sad thing that you find that wealth, the dunya, is something that can very, very easily make a person forget his religion. Fine? As the Prophet ﷺ said, Jannah is surrounded by makarih, and Jahannam is surrounded by shahawat. That Jannah, paradise, is surrounded by things which are disliked to the nafs. The soul finds difficulty in it. As for Jahannam, then around it you see that which you're inclined to. You see that which that which a person desires. Fine. And it's very well known. We'll mention the hadith because there's a very famous hadith in regard to this, in regard to haram wealth. The hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, which comes in Sahih Muslim. Fine, where he tells us that Allah only accepts pure wealth. Allah only accepts that which is pure. And then he mentions the hadith, and then towards the end of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions a man who he's covered in dust from traveling. Fine, he's on a long travel. Fine, ash'atha aghbara, that his hair's a mess, or his state, you can tell that he's been in a long travel. And we all know that when you travel, your dua, your supplication is answered, right? It's very likely to be answered. يَمُدُّ يَدَيْهِ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, and he stretches his hands to the sky, this man who's traveling, and he says, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, oh Lord, oh Lord. Fine? And so he's making supplication. But what does the Prophet ﷺ say? He says, مَطْعَمُهُ haram, وَمَشْرَبُهُ haram, وَمَلْبَسُهُ haram, وَغُذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. He says his food is haram, his drink is haram, his clothes were earned from haram, and his nourishment, that which he has within him, fine, is haram. فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لِذَلِكَ. So the Prophet asks a question, a rhetorical question. He says, how do you expect such a person's dua to be answered? How on earth, fine, can a person in that state, what are the odds of that dua being answered? Fine. So we ask Allah to give us halal income. And that's from one of the supplications that a person makes. He asks for rizqan tayyibah. He asks for pure wealth. Rizqan tayyibah wa amalan salihah. He asks for pure wealth, halal wealth, and righteous actions. Moving on from this, we benefit that in regard to this event that we just took, all of the Quraysh, all of those people that were there, the heads of Quraysh, find the seniors from amongst that society, when the Prophet ﷺ entered, none of them felt displeasure. All of them were pleased that he be the one to rule. And they said Atakumul Ameen, that the truthful one has come to you. Is that with me? And we know this was from the names of the Prophet ﷺ, that which he was known for. Rather, in some of the narrations, it even says that they said Radina, that we're pleased. We're pleased with who has come. We're pleased that Muhammad has come. Fine. How do we benefit from this? We benefit from this if it wasn't for the fact that the character, the personality, the very person of the Prophet ﷺ was known, well known, fine, well recognized between his people, then they wouldn't have given him this welcome. They wouldn't have welcomed him as the one to be the one to judge between them. They wouldn't have been so delighted and so happy with this matter. Is that with me? Imagine now that someone who used to isolate himself, fine, used to keep himself to himself, fine, and no one didn't really intermingle with the people at all. And this person was to come in. This person, when they said that, fine, to kind of come to an agreement that whoever comes through, whoever comes in, we will take him as a judge between us. If that individual was to come in, fine, and he was someone who didn't mix with the people, someone who wasn't very known as such, what would their statement have been when he entered? Is everyone with me? So if you ponder over this, then you understand that the characteristics, the etiquette the suluk, the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to have been something well known, something well praised between all of his people, because in this, the heads of his people, of all of the tribes. Is everyone with me? And so we know that the Prophet ﷺ was well known, and he was someone who would mingle. He was someone that was well known, meaning he would mingle with the people. Fine? He would mingle with the people, although yes, he used to reject issues pertaining to Jahiliyyah. He used to reject the worship of idols and statues. He used to reject making tawaf, fine, for statues and idols, fine. He used to reject slaughtering animals for the sake of idols and statues and false deities. Yes, but with that said, fine, he would still what? Mingle with them. Fine. From this we also benefit what? The fact that the Prophet was well known and he would mingle with the people, and he wasn't just someone who was isolated. We learn that the limits, fine, the limits to which a person mingles with the people and isolates himself. We learn the boundaries. Fine. A person doesn't isolate completely, and likewise, he doesn't just become immersed within the people and whatever they do, he does. Nor here nor there. Islam is what? In between. Fine? And with regard to our own, within our own lives, how do we implement this? For example, the issue of good company and bad company, or friends which have some mistakes, or friends, family, whoever it might be, close ones who need some advice. Fine? We understand from this, we learn kind of the limits. Fine? That a person, what does he try to do? He tries to establish the link. The important thing is to keep that link. Fine? To lay the foundations of some type of connection. Fine? And in real life, something that we can apply it to is that, especially when it comes to all of these things that are celebrated. All of these things that are celebrated, all of these things that are very widespread in our time that contradict many principles of Islam. For example, the Mawlid. For example, some of our family members, some of our friends, someone celebrates the Mawlid, for example. Fine? Us now, you as a Muslim now, you as someone trying to stick to the truth, you're not going to take part in it. You're not going to go and join this celebration of the Mawlid. But that doesn't mean you're not the first one that goes and educates people and wants to learn about, read about, speak about the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ in general. Is everyone with me? And it can be with the same people. Fine? Things like weddings. Things like weddings and craziness that happens at weddings. So now, you don't have to be the individual that dives headfirst into the crazy affairs. So when all of the hoo-ha is going on, you're nowhere to be seen. But generally speaking, you're the first one to show happiness for what? For the marriage. You're the first one to show pleasure at, fine, such an event. And likewise, birthdays. You don't have to be the individual singing happy birthday, fine, or bringing a cake, fine. But it doesn't mean you're not the one that's always showing love to the children, always showing love to the young ones. Is everyone with me? So the point here is that there's no necessary bond. There's no necessary bond between what? All of these practices that we just mentioned and all of the other things that are similar to that, fine, and things that oppose general principles of Islam and stuff, fine. There's no contradiction or necessary bond between this and your bond with people. This is one thing, and a person's bond, relation, connection with an individual is something completely different. Right? And if a person now believes that there's an innate bond between the two, that these things that happen and your bond with a person, they have to be connected. As in, the more you partake in these things that we want to do, the more you, therefore, the stronger your bond is. And the lesser you partake, the weaker your bond is. A person who believes this, then his concept of such a bond is superficial. Is everyone with me? A person who believes this, then his concept of the bond is superficial, to say the least. Right? So it's important for a person now, seeking Allah's pleasure, to try his best to strike this balance. Fine? And of course, in our time, with so much going on, fine, so many of these different things that we're talking about, a person might slip. A person might get the balance wrong. Fine? Everyone makes mistakes. The point here and what's important here is to keep Allah's pleasure in your mind. To keep Allah's pleasure in your heart. And likewise, to keep Allah's anger in your mind and Allah's anger in your heart. Is everyone with me? Because just like Allah is the most forgiving, He's also the one who is severe in punishment. Fine? A Muslim balances between the two. So a person is not too lax, and likewise he's not too rigid. Fine? Not too lax and not too rigid. And if we understand this, what I just said about trying to strike that balance, then we understand how important it is for us to learn. For us to gain some form of basic knowledge, because how does a person know what's rigid and what's lax? How do you make that distinction? Fine? Clearly, that distinction has to be built upon what? Some form of knowledge, some form of information to say, okay, this is now an informed judgment to say this is rigid and this is lax. And a person didn't just say from his desires, he feels as though it's rigid, he feels as though it's lax. Is everyone with me? Fine. And so again, all of these ideas can help us a lot when it comes to these type of issues, when to mix, when to isolate, when to avoid certain matters, when to delve into certain matters. Fine. Coming back to the subject matter, which is that there's no doubt, fine, that the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was given the nickname, fine, of the trustworthy, fine, of Al-Amin, that these type of nicknames that a person gets, when a person gets that type of name, Al-Amin, for example, those type of titles, they don't come like this. They don't come with ease. They don't come very quick. And this again, it shows us and proves to us without a shadow of a doubt that there must have been much intermingling and relations, fine, and transactions and other than that, that has happened, fine, between the Prophet ﷺ and his people. In order for him, the very fact that he has that name. Is everyone with me? Fine. Another benefit, and we're still talking about, this is all just from the statement that when the Prophet ﷺ came in, the response of the people when they said the trustworthy has come. To the end of it. Fine. We're still talking about this. Fine. This statement, when they said the truthful has come, this is a proof upon the disbelievers. This is a proof upon them. They've established evidence upon themselves. Fine. Why? Because bear in mind, these are the same people that label him the truthful, as-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful one, the trustworthy one, fine, the one reliable, fine, the one known for good manners. But yet as soon as the Prophet ﷺ comes with the call to Tawheed, with the call to worship Allah, with the call to La ilaha illallah, with the call to leave your idols and your shirk and come and worship Allah alone, what do those titles change to? You go from the trustworthy, fine, Al-Amin, to what? To you're a sahir, you're a magician, you're a kadhab, you're a liar, fine, you're a poet, you're a what? You're a soothsayer. Is everyone with me? So this black and white, this night and day, is a proof of, upon these people. Right? And from this we learn, for our benefit, from our benefit we learn what? That just like this, when we want to advise someone, fine, when we want to give someone da'wah or call someone that might be not upon Islam or have issues in Islam, that us likewise, we might have to be patient and we might what? Face these names. Because the Prophet ﷺ was the most truthful. Is everyone with me? And he did have impeccable character. And they still flipped from these names to these names. So what about everyone less than him? And what would they have said to people who were of lesser stature than the Prophet ﷺ? Is everyone with me? So from this we benefit in our own selves, fine, not to what? Not to shake and quiver when faced with maybe some type of backlash or some type of names and other than that, ridicule, for calling someone to that which you see as and know as guidance. Is everyone with me? Fine, these type of descriptions that are thrown at people. Fine, whether they be, for example, and we mentioned some of them before, that you want to advise someone in regards to a particular issue, and you hear names, in regard to small things, you hear names, he's extreme, you hear names, he doesn't mix with the people, and other than that, fine. So these type of things that might be thrown at a person for wanting to call someone to the truth, then a person's patient upon them. A person's patient upon them, and he remembers what was said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is everyone with me? Type. Does everyone remember? I hope everyone was. I think everyone was present in the lesson. What we said about the story of the elephant. Think back now. Think back. When we were talking about the story of the elephant. When we were talking about the story of the elephant, we mentioned something, and we mentioned one of the benefits we mentioned from the story of the elephant was what? That event that took place, fine, is something that distinguished the tribe of Quraysh from amongst the other tribes. If everyone remembers, fine. We mentioned that it's as if it was an introduction to what is going to come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming out of such a tribe. Is everyone with me? So here we benefit what? Just like the story of the elephant and what happened there was Allah Azza wa Jal distinguishing the Quraysh and building an introduction for what will come, then likewise this event, which is very close to the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is Allah distinguishing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from within the Quraysh, fine, as an introduction for what will come. Is everyone with me? So it's the same benefit, but on a what? On a fine-tuned scale. On a fine-tuned scale. Is everyone with me? It's as if Allah is paving the way for this honor, for this sharaf that will come, fine, with the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is everyone with me? Fine, and we'll end with a benefit. And that's that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we didn't actually mention it, but we mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam helped in the building of the Kaaba, and him and his uncle helped, and we said that they helped move the stones. Fine, they helped transport the stones. When they were helping transport the stones, fine, his uncle said to him, he said, place your izar, which is your lower garment, place it on your neck, Muhammad. Why? Place it on your neck so that the stones, they don't affect you. Is that with me? It will protect you from the stones that we're carrying. Right? When he said this, and the Prophet said, what actually happened is he fell unconscious. He fell unconscious. Fine? Something overcame him, and he fell unconscious. Fine? And when he did awake, when he came to his senses, when he awoke, fine, he said, Izari, Izari. He said, what? My garment, my garment. Fine? That was what was in the Prophet's head. Where's his garment? Fine? This, what I've just described here, this what happened here, is a snapshot, fine, from the many times that Allah Azza wa Jal has protected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even from when he was very young. Even from before his prophethood, Allah has protected him from certain characteristics, from falling into certain things. Is everyone with me? Because even before his prophethood, the Prophet ﷺ was what? He was very thoughtful, mindful, and paid attention to what? That parts of him weren't exposed. Is everyone with me? So we can benefit from this. That the Prophet ﷺ, look at this. To the point he didn't want, fine, his bottom half to be exposed, and so he didn't want to take his bottom garment, even if it's protecting him from stones or other than that. Fine, and so Allah caused him to what? Become unconscious. And this is likewise something similar happened when people were drinking alcohol, and the Prophet ﷺ was gonna what? Was gonna go. Fine, that time, and illicit things were happening, and the Prophet ﷺ, something overcome him also. Fine, Allah protected him from being in that environment. Fine, so we can benefit from this in regard to what? Us now giving importance to covering our awrah, covering that part which we should, fine, which we're commanded to. And we find from the people they don't pay any attention, they don't give any awareness to parts of them being exposed in front of people, in front of other people. They take off their top, fine, or whatever it might be, and they're walking amongst people, fine, without a top. Fine. This is not suitable for any individual, male, let alone female, Muslim, who respects himself and respects others. Fine. Rather, when a person who does these type of things, fine, these type of things, they indicate, fine, to certain characteristics which aren't nice. They indicate a sense of what? Modesty. Fine. This clearly isn't modest. They indicate almost to a type of pride in oneself. That a person wants people's vision to be what? Directed towards him. Or doesn't care about such. Fine. They indicate to the mentality of I don't care. Fine. And in regard to the issue of a person exposing himself, the scholars of Islam, the majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, fine, 3 out of the 4 madhahib, some say 4, all 4, fine, say that a person shouldn't uncover his awrah even when he's on his own. Even if it's just him in the house, he shouldn't expose his awrah. Fine. So if the majority of the scholars of Islam say that a person shouldn't expose his own awrah, and he's on his own, there's no one with him, fine, in private, without a need, then what would those same scholars say in regard to the same thing in front of other people? Is everyone with me? So this is something definitely to take into account. Is there any questions with anything that has preceded? With that, we have finished talking about the building the Kaaba. We have one more event to take, inshallah, before we move on to the initiation of the Messenger's Prophethood, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The next any second now. If anyone has any questions, feel free to send me a message, inshallah, and I'll try my best to respond. If not, we'll leave it there. بإذن جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.